My name is Gina Aubrey. I'm 40 years old, and I have worked as a paralegal for 11 years. I raised my daughter alone since she was 7. I have reviewed thousands of contracts, depositions, and court filings. None of that prepared me for what my sister did to my child. 4 months ago, my mother died. She left everything to my daughter, Sophie. The house, the savings, $240,000. Deborah, my older sister, did not receive a cent, and she decided that was something she could change. She called it a family meeting. She told Sophie it was about healing, about closure. When Sophie walked into our mother's living room that Saturday afternoon, there were no casseroles on the counter and no tissues on the table. There was a lawyer in a gray vest, a stack of documents, and 3 adults staring at a 21-year-old girl who came alone. But my sister made one mistake. She believed I would not find out until it was too late. What happened in that living room over the next 40 minutes reshaped our family from the inside out. And it started the moment I walked through the front door. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is a place where real family stories unfold. The betrayals, the boundaries, and the quiet strength it takes to protect the people you love. If this story speaks to you, leave a comment and be sure to subscribe. My mother, Ruth Aubrey, lived in a small yellow house on Maple Drive in Millbrook, Ohio. She had been a third-grade teacher for 31 years. She retired at 63, and she spent the next 9 years tending her garden, reading mystery novels on the porch, and baking lemon bars for every neighbor within 3 blocks. She had 2 daughters. Deborah, the oldest, was 45. I was the younger one by 5 years. Growing up, Deborah was the charming one, the one who could talk her way into anything. Our father adored her. He called her his golden girl. He called me his quiet one. When he passed away 16 years ago, Deborah received most of his attention. I got what was left behind. Mom saw things differently. She never said it outright, but she noticed things. She noticed Deborah visited when she needed money. She noticed I visited when she needed company. She noticed that when her health started to decline, it was not Deborah who showed up with groceries at 7 o'clock in the morning. Mom always said Deborah had the charm and I had the patience. I thought that was just something mothers say, something gentle and meaningless to balance the scales. But 4 months after her funeral, sitting in my kitchen with a stack of bank records and a letter I was never meant to find, I understood what she truly meant. She meant that patience was the thing that would hold this family together when charm tried to tear it apart. What I did not know yet was how much patience I would need. Sophie moved in with my mother 2 years before she died. She was 19, halfway through nursing school and surviving on financial aid and a part-time job at a pharmacy. I could not afford to help much. Paralegal salaries in small-town Ohio do not stretch very far, and I was still paying off my own student loans. But Mom had a spare room, and Sophie needed somewhere stable. What started as a practical arrangement turned into something deeper. Sophie cooked dinner every night. She drove Mom to appointments. She sat on the edge of the bed and read aloud from the mystery novels Mom could no longer hold steady. When Mom had difficult nights, Sophie slept in the chair beside her. Deborah visited 3 times in those 2 years. Each time she walked through the front door, glanced around the house like she was evaluating it, and asked about the finances. She never asked how Mom was feeling. She asked about the house. The second visit, Deborah pulled me aside in the hallway. Has Mom updated her will recently? I told her I did not know. She said, someone should look into that. Then she poured herself a glass of wine and left before dinner was ready. Sophie told me once, while we were folding laundry in Mom's living room, that she overheard Deborah on the phone in the backyard. She was talking to Ree about the property value. Sophie said she closed the window. I told Sophie not to worry about it. I told her to focus on school and on Grandma. I told her the right things would happen when the time came. I believed that because I had to. Mom died on a Tuesday in January. Pancreatic cancer. It had been quick at the end. The hospice nurse said she went peacefully, but I do not think anyone who watched their mothers breathing slow into silence would use that word. The funeral was small. 42 people in a church that held 300. Sophie stood beside me the entire time. Deborah arrived 20 minutes late wearing sunglasses. She never took them off. The will was read the following Thursday in the office of Harold Kimball, Mom's estate attorney. Sophie Deborah, and I sat across from his desk. The room smelled like old carpet and coffee that had been sitting too long. Harold read it plainly. The house on Maple Drive, along with all savings accounts totaling $240,000, would go to Sophie Marie Aubrey. There was a line underneath that I will never forget. To my granddaughter Sophie, who was here when it mattered. Deborah did not get the house. She did not get the savings. She did not receive $1. I watched her face. She did not cry. She did not yell. She sat perfectly still, her hands flat on her thighs, her jaw tight. She looked at Harold as if he had read the wrong document. Harold asked if there were questions. Deborah said no. She stood up, buttoned her coat, and walked out without looking at either of us. Sophie whispered, "Is she okay?" I said, "Give her time." That silence lasted exactly 48 hours. Thursday evening, my phone rang. "Deborah, we need to talk about this." Her voice was flat, rehearsed, like she had practiced the sentence in front of a mirror. "Talk about what?" "The will." "Gina, it isn't fair." Mom was not thinking clearly when she wrote it. Sophie lived there. She had influence. This should have been divided between us. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I could hear Ree in the background, his voice low and steady, feeding her lines. "Deborah, this was Mom's decision. She was evaluated by her doctor. The attorney confirmed her capacity. The will is valid. I'm her daughter, her firstborn. You think she would leave me nothing. I think she left what she wanted to leave." She hung up. 2 hours later, Sophie called. She sounded shaken. "Aunt Deborah just called me. She said Grandma was confused when she made the will. She said I need to do the right thing." I closed my eyes. I pictured Mom's cedar jewelry box on her dresser, the one she had kept since before I was born. The smell of cedar every time she opened it. Inside were clip-on earrings and a ruby brooch she wore to church. That box held everything she considered precious. She had considered Sophie precious. "Sophie, listen to me. Grandma wrote exactly what she wanted. Deborah is hurting, but that does not give her the right to rewrite Mom's wishes." Sophie was quiet. Then she said, "This is not over." I said, "I know." I sat in the dark for a long time after that call. I was already thinking about what to do next. Not because I was afraid, but because I had read enough legal disputes to recognize when someone was building a case. Monday morning, I walked into Morrison & Finch, the firm where I had worked for 9 years. I went straight to the office at the end of the hall. Robert Webb was 55, a senior estate attorney and the closest thing I had to a mentor. He wore reading glasses on a chain and drank his coffee black. He had reviewed more contested wills than anyone in the county. "I need a favor," I said. He leaned back. "Personal or professional?" "Both." I told him everything. Mom's will. Deborah's reaction. The phone calls. The pressure on Sophie. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he removed his glasses. "The will is clean. Harold Kimball drafted it. Capacity evaluation on file. 2 witnesses. Then it stands. Deborah can challenge it, but she'll lose. She is not going to court, Robert. She is going to pressure Sophie until Sophie gives in." He nodded slowly. "That is the more common play. I want you to represent Sophie officially. I want Deborah to know there is counsel on the other side." Robert agreed. He also suggested something I had not considered. An audit of Mom's bank accounts for the last 12 months. "If there's a pattern of financial exploitation," he said, "it changes the conversation." I signed the paperwork that afternoon. Robert filed the request. Before I left his office, I told Sophie the same thing I would repeat every day for the next 3 weeks. "If anyone asks you to sign anything, you call me first. You do not read it. You do not touch it. You do not pick up the pen. You call me." She promised. 2 weeks later, Robert called. "Gina, you need to see this." The bank records arrived in a manila folder. 6 pages. Robert had marked the relevant lines with yellow tabs. 6 withdrawals from Mom's savings account over 8 months. $3,000 here. $2,000 there. One for $5,000. Total, $15,000. All while Mom was in hospice or too weak to leave the house. 3 of the withdrawal slips had her signature, or something close to it. I had seen Mom's handwriting my entire life. She wrote in narrow cursive that tilted slightly to the right. These signatures were too upright, too careful. The strokes were heavier, like someone pressing hard to imitate a hand that no longer had strength. Robert pointed to the dates. The last withdrawal was 9 days before she died. Your mother was on continuous pain management at that point. She could barely hold a cup. I sat in his office and felt the floor shift beneath me, not because I was surprised, because I had suspected it for months. And now I was holding the proof. Can we pursue this? I asked. Forgery of a financial document is a felony in Ohio, but criminal charges are a nuclear option. If you file, it becomes public. It becomes permanent. I'm not filing anything yet. He looked at me over his glasses. Then what are you doing? Waiting. Waiting for what? For her to make a move loud enough that she cannot take it back. Robert did not argue. He made copies. He certified them. He slid them into a manila envelope with the audit report and the will. I took that envelope home and locked it inside my briefcase. I pushed the briefcase to the back of my bedroom closet. I saved everything. Every page. Every timestamp. Deborah did not wait. She worked the phones like a campaign manager. She called Uncle Tom first, Mom's younger brother in Pennsylvania. Then Aunt Linda, Dad's sister in Kentucky. Then every cousin close enough to have an opinion and far enough away not to know the truth. Her version went like this. Sophie, a 21-year-old nursing student, had manipulated their elderly grandmother into rewriting the will. Gina, the bitter divorced sister, was supporting her because she wanted the money funneled through her daughter. The will was the result of undue influence, and the family should demand a correction. It was polished. It was coordinated. And by the end of the second week, my phone had gone mostly silent. Cousin Ellen called. Ellen was 38, the daughter of my late Uncle Bill. She lived 2 towns over and had always been the fair one in the family. Gina, is any of this true? Deborah says Sophie pressured Aunt Ruth. Ellen's Sophie was the only one who showed up. She cooked, she cleaned, she drove Mom to every appointment. Deborah visited 3 times in 2 years. Ellen paused. I want to believe you, but Deborah sounds really hurt. She is, but hurt does not mean right. Ellen said she would stay out of it. That was better than I expected. Then Brenda weighed in. Brenda was Ree's mother, Deborah's mother-in-law. She posted on Facebook that some people take advantage of their elders and call it love. She did not mention Sophie by name. She did not have to. That same week, Ree showed up at a gas station in town. Word spread quickly that he was back. Deborah had told everyone he was gone for good. Apparently, inheritance money was enough to bring him home. Have you ever had family turn on you over money? Because I have. And it taught me that silence is not peace. It is a countdown. Ray Kessler showed up at my front door on a Wednesday evening. 7:12 p.m. Sophie was at the library studying for her clinical exams. He knocked 3 times. Hard. I looked through the peephole and saw his truck in the driveway, engine still running. I did not open the door. I spoke through it. Can I help you, Ray? Open the door, Gina. We need to talk. About what? You know what? This inheritance mess. It has gone far enough. I leaned against the doorframe. If you have legal concerns about the will, you can contact Robert Webb at Morrison & Finch. He represents Sophie. A pause. Then a laugh. Low and dry. Legal concerns. This is family, Gina, not a courtroom. It became a courtroom the moment Deborah started calling everyone we share blood with and telling them my daughter is a thief. He did not answer immediately. I heard him shift his weight on the porch boards. Deborah is hurting, he said. Your mother left her nothing. That is cruel. My mother left what she chose to leave. If you want to discuss cruelty, we can talk about the $15,000 that disappeared from her account while she was dying. Silence. I did not elaborate. I did not need to. He walked back to his truck, sat in the driver's seat, and did not turn on the headlights. He stayed there for 20 minutes before pulling away. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the taillights disappear down the street. My hands were steady, but my chest was tight. Ray was not dangerous. But he was the kind of man who believed volume was authority and presence was power. He was wrong about both. The following week, Robert called me into his office. He had the full audit report finalized and a certified copy of the will from probate court. He slid a manila envelope across the desk. It was thick, heavy in the hand. The way things become heavy when they carry consequences. "Everything is in there," he said. Certified will, capacity evaluation, bank statements, withdrawal slips with the flagged signatures, and a letter from the bank confirming the account holder was under hospice care during the withdrawal period. I picked it up and held it with both hands. "What do you want to do with this?" he asked. "Hold it." "For how long?" "Until the right moment." Robert removed his glasses and folded them on the desk. "Gina, I've been doing this for 23 years. The right moment is usually the one that feels wrong. It is the moment where you would rather stay silent, but you speak. It is the one where the room is full of people convinced you are the villain." "I know," I said. "And I'm ready for that. I've been ready since the bank records came back." He nodded. "One more thing. The signature analysis." I sent the 3 flagged withdrawal slips to a forensic document examiner. Preliminary opinion: the signatures do not match the known handwriting samples of Ruth Aubrey. That is not a court ruling, but it is enough to open a criminal referral. I placed the envelope in my briefcase. I drove home with it resting on the passenger seat. That night, I locked it in the closet beside the first set of copies. 2 envelopes now. 1 truth. 1 plan. I locked the briefcase away in my closet. I knew I would need it. Sophie came home from campus that Thursday with red eyes and a voice that cracked every other word. "She came to school, Mom." I set down my coffee. "Who?" "Aunt Deborah. She was in the parking lot by the nursing building. She waited for me after my clinical." Sophie sat on the couch and pulled her knees to her chest. She was 21, but in that moment, she looked 12. She stood there with her arms crossed. My friend Kayla was right next to me, and Deborah said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You took what belongs to me." I felt my jaw tighten. "What did you do?" "I walked away. I didn't say anything. I just kept walking and she yelled after me." Sophie paused. Her voice broke. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of you." I sat beside her and wrapped my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me the way she used to when she was little, and the world became too loud. "She is lying, Sophie. Grandma wrote exactly what she wanted. She wrote it clearly, with a lawyer, with witnesses. Grandma chose you because you earned it. Every dinner, every drive, every night in that chair beside her bed." Sophie wiped her eyes. "Kayla asked me afterward what that was about. I couldn't even explain." "You do not have to explain. Not to Kayla, not to Deborah, not to anyone." She nodded, but her hands were still trembling. That night, Sophie asked me something I was not prepared for. We were sitting at the kitchen table. Leftover pasta. 2 glasses of water. The kind of dinner you eat when you do not have the energy to cook or the appetite to enjoy it. Sophie pushed her fork around the plate. Then she looked up. "Maybe I should just give it to her." I set down my glass. "All of it," she said. "The house, the money. If it makes her stop. If it makes the family stop talking about me like I'm some kind of con artist." She shook her head. "I can't do this, Mom. I'm in the middle of my final clinical rotation. I have boards in 5 weeks. I can't keep looking over my shoulder for Aunt Deborah in a parking lot." I did not answer immediately. I looked at my daughter and thought about my mother. I thought about the last time I visited, 3 days before she died. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she squeezed my hand and said, "Sophie is the one who stayed." She said it like a fact. "Like weather." "No," I said. Sophie looked at me. "You are not signing anything. You are not giving anything away. Grandma left this to you because she wanted you to have it. Not because she forgot about Deborah, because she remembered everything Deborah did and still chose you." Sophie stayed quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to fix this," I said. "But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She nodded. "I trust you." "Good. Now eat your pasta." She almost smiled. That was enough. The next morning, Deborah sent a group text to the whole family. The message went out at 8:43 on a Monday morning. I know because I was pouring coffee when my phone buzzed 4 times in a row. Deborah had created a group chat. Me, Sophie, Ellen, Uncle Tom, Aunt Linda, Brenda, and Ray. Family meeting this Saturday at Mom's house, 2 p.m. We need to settle this like adults. Everyone is welcome. This is about doing right by Mom's memory. Sophie forwarded it to me. Are you going? No, I said. You are. She stared at me. You're going to walk in there, sit down, and listen. You're not going to argue. You're not going to defend yourself. And you are absolutely not going to sign a single piece of paper. What if they have a lawyer? That question told me everything. Sophie was not naive. She had grown up watching me read depositions at the kitchen table. She knew what a coordinated effort looked like. If they have a lawyer, you sit and listen. You say, I need time to review this with my own counsel. That's it. That is the only sentence you need. She nodded slowly. And where will you be? Close. I called Robert that afternoon. Saturday. 2 p.m. Mom's house on Maple Drive. If they try anything, I need you there. Robert was quiet for a moment. How close do you want me? In your car outside. I'll text you. You walk in. Done. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I reviewed the certified will. I organized the bank records. I reread the forensic examiner's preliminary report. I put everything into my briefcase, organized by tab, indexed by date. Saturday came faster than I wanted it to. 2 days before the meeting, Thursday evening, Sophie called from Mom's house. She had been packing up some of the bedroom closets, sorting through coats and scarves and old photo albums. Mom, I found something. Her voice was careful, not upset. Careful. In Grandma's cedar box. The jewelry one. I was looking for her pearl brooch to wear Saturday. I lifted the velvet lining and there was a letter underneath. My chest tightened. A letter. In Grandma's handwriting. Addressed to me. I drove to Maple Drive in 14 minutes. Sophie was sitting on the edge of the bed, the cedar box open beside her. The smell hit me the second I walked in. Cedar. Dust. And something faintly sweet, like lotion. The smell of my mother's room. The letter was 2 pages. Yellow legal paper. Blue ink. Narrow cursive tilting slightly to the right. It was unmistakably Mom's handwriting. Sophie handed it to me without a word. The letter began. Dear Sophie, if you are reading this, then the will has been read and Deborah is angry. I know because I know my daughter. I read the rest standing in the hallway with my back against the wall. She wrote that Deborah had borrowed $80,000 over 15 years. She wrote that none of it was ever repaid. She wrote that when she was in the hospital for a week in March, 2 years before she died, someone withdrew money from her savings using her name. I know who. I did not confront her because I did not have the strength for that fight. But I changed my will because love should not be a debt someone collects on. The last line read, Show this to your mother. She will know what to do. I read the letter once more. Then I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in my briefcase. Sophie said, she knew the whole time. I said, yes, she did. Friday morning, I sat across from Robert in his office with the letter on the desk between us. He read it twice. Then he set it down and pressed his fingers together. This is consistent with the bank records, he said. Your mother documented the pattern herself. 80,000 in loans. 0 repayment. Unauthorized withdrawals. She was aware and chose not to confront it. She chose to protect herself the only way she could. Through the will. Robert nodded. This letter won't hold up as a legal affidavit, he said, but as corroborative evidence, it's strong. It establishes intent. It supports the financial exploitation. And it explains the disinheritance. I'm not planning to use it in court. He looked at me. Then where? In that room. In front of the people Deborah convinced that Sophie stole from my mother. Robert understood. He always did. We spent the next 2 hours organizing everything. The certified will, the bank audit, the forensic handwriting analysis, my mother's letter. Each document went into my briefcase in clean, tabbed sections. Robert printed a 1-page summary sheet listing every piece of evidence with dates. Before I left, I called Sophie. You're walking in at 2. Sit in the armchair by the window. Don't sit on the couch next to Deborah. If anyone hands you anything, say, I will review this with my counsel. If it gets heated, stay quiet. I'll be there when you need me. She paused. I'm scared. I know. But you're not going to be alone. I promise. That night, I placed the briefcase by the front door. I checked it twice before bed. Again at 5 a.m. Saturday morning, 6:47. I was already awake. Sophie wore a white blouse and dark slacks. She pinned my mother's pearl brooch to her collar. She looked older than 21, like someone walking into something she didn't choose, but refused to avoid. We drove separately. Sophie arrived first, parking at the curb. I parked 2 blocks east, behind the hardware store where no one from the family would see my car. Robert was already in position. Silver sedan 1 block north. Engine off. Phone in hand. I texted him. 2 unknown vehicles at the house. He replied. Copy. Standing by. From my position, I could see everything. Sophie's car at the curb. Ray's black truck in the driveway. A dark gray sedan I didn't recognize. The lawyer's car. I watched Sophie walk up the front steps. She paused, touched the pearl brooch at her collar, then opened the door and went inside. I stayed in my car. Hands on the steering wheel. Briefcase on the passenger seat. Dashboard clock, 1:58. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Sophie, there is a man I don't know. Gray vest. Briefcase. Sitting at the dining table. Me, do not sign anything. Listen only. I'm close. Sophie, okay?
I texted Robert.
They brought a lawyer. You're up. Wait for my signal. His reply came instantly. Ready. A gust of wind pushed a napkin across the lawn. Curtains in the front window stayed drawn. Inside that house, 3 adults were preparing to pressure my daughter into giving up everything my mother had left her. I waited. Not much longer now. Sophie later told me what happened in the first 10 minutes. She walked into the living room and saw Deborah already on the couch, legs crossed, hands folded, calm, rehearsed. Ray stood by the window, arms crossed, staring outside like he didn't belong to the situation. Brenda sat in the recliner near the bookshelf, face set in quiet judgment. And at the dining table, Neil Pratt. Mid-40s. Gray vest. White shirt. Leather folder open. Not an estate attorney. A general practice lawyer. A friend of Ray's from the VFW. A manila envelope sat on the coffee table, sealed and waiting. Deborah smiled. Sophie, honey, sit down. We're so glad you came. Sophie sat in the armchair by the window, just as instructed. Purse on her lap. Hands still. We want to resolve this, Deborah said. Mom wouldn't have wanted fighting. This is about family. Sophie said nothing. Neil cleared his throat and slid the manila envelope open. A document came out and moved across the table toward her. This is a voluntary relinquishment of your rights to the estate assets, he said. Standard procedure. Once you sign, everything transfers to your aunt and we can all move forward. Would you have stayed in that chair? At 21, facing 3 adults and a lawyer, all of them certain you would fold? Sophie stayed seated. She didn't reach for it immediately. Neil pushed it closer and tapped the page once. It's simple. 2 pages. Signature on the last line. 5 minutes and it's done. Sophie picked it up. She read slowly. Then she spoke. This says I give up all rights to the house and savings. It also says I waive my right to contest any future claims against the estate. Correct, Neil said. Clean transfer. Clean for who? Silence. Deborah leaned forward. Sophie, your grandmother was sick. She wasn't thinking clearly. I'm her daughter. I took care of her for years. You're 21. What are you going to do with a house and $240,000? Let me handle it. That's what family does. Brenda added from the recliner. Your grandmother would have wanted this. Sophie placed the document back on the table. I need to review this with my own attorney. Neil shook his head. There's no need. This is a family agreement. I said I need to review it with my own attorney. The room tightened. Deborah's smile faded. Ray turned fully from the window. Brenda shifted in her seat. 3 adults, all staring at one 21-year-old girl. The same girl who had cooked, cleaned, and sat beside a dying woman through nights they never showed up for. And then, a knock at the front door. I opened it. No hesitation. No second knock. No waiting to be invited. I stepped inside. Closed the door. Sat my briefcase down. Sorry I'm late. Deborah stood halfway. This is a family meeting, Gina. You weren't invited. My daughter was. Sophie is an adult, she snapped. She can handle this herself. She is handling it. That's exactly why she didn't sign anything. I walked to Sophie and stood beside her chair. My hand rested on her shoulder. She exhaled, finally. Ray stepped forward. Nobody wants a fight. We're trying to settle this the right way. Then you won't mind, I'm here to help make sure it is the right way. Neil closed his folder. Ma'am, this is a private discussion. I looked at him. A private discussion with a lawyer present, legal documents on the table, and no independent counsel for the signatory? That's not a discussion. That's a pressure campaign. Neil's jaw tightened. I sat on the arm of Sophie's chair, crossed my ankles, and folded my hands. I did not open the briefcase. Not yet. So I said, "Who wants to start?" No one spoke. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily. It had been in this room since I was 6 years old. Mom used to wind it every Sunday. I waited. Deborah recovered first. She always did. Composure was her strongest weapon, and she used it the way others use charm. We're all here because of Mom, she said, folding her hands together. And I think we owe it to her memory to resolve this fairly. Sophie is young. She doesn't need the burden of a house and a large sum of money at 21. I'm offering to take responsibility for the estate, manage it properly, and make sure everyone benefits. Everyone meaning you, I said. Everyone meaning the family, she corrected. Ray stepped away from the window and moved closer to the table. Gina, you're making this harder than it needs to be.
Am I?
Deborah is the eldest. She was Mom's first child. She has every right to. She has no right, I said quietly. Not to this house. Not to that money. Mom made her decision, and the court has already certified it. Neil tried again. The document Sophie is reviewing is entirely voluntary. No one is forcing. Mr. Pratt, I said and watched him pause. You weren't introduced, but I already know who you are. That part came from Robert, who had run the plates that morning. You're not a certified estate attorney. You handle general practice, DUIs, property disputes. You weren't retained by Sophie, and you didn't give her independent legal advice. Anything she signs in this room without counsel is contestable. The room went completely still. Neil looked at Ray. Ray looked at Deborah. Deborah looked at the carpet. I didn't continue right away. Silence, when used correctly, does more work than words. So I let it sit. Then the front door opened without a knock. Ellen Aubrey stepped in holding a bottle of wine and wearing a confused expression. Her hair was damp, like she had left in a hurry. She stopped in the entryway. Looked at the table. Looked at Neil. Looked at the document on the coffee table. What is going on? Deborah stood quickly. Ellen, thank you for coming. We're just finishing some family paperwork. Ellen placed the wine on the hallway table. You told me this was dinner. You said Mom's pot roast and old photos. It is, Deborah said quickly. After, Ellen looked at Sophie. Sophie met her eyes and gave a small shake of her head. Deborah noticed. Who is that man? Ellen asked, pointing at Neil. He's helping with legal formalities, Deborah said. Legal formalities at a family dinner? Ellen repeated. Brenda spoke from the recliner. It's nothing, Ellen. Just paperwork Sophie needs to sign. Ellen turned to me. Gina, what is happening? So I told her. My sister arranged a meeting with a lawyer to pressure Sophie into signing away her inheritance. No independent counsel. No notice. Sophie is 21, and she was alone in this room until I arrived. Ellen's expression changed instantly. She looked at Deborah, then at the document, then at Neil. She crossed her arms. Nobody told me there would be lawyers here. Deborah's composure cracked. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Ellen asked sharply. Because from here, it looks exactly like that. That's when I sent the message. One word to Robert. No. 90 seconds later, a firm knock hit the front door. 3 knocks. Measured. Controlled. I stood and walked to it. Opened it. Robert Webb stood on the porch in a charcoal suit, leather briefcase in hand. Tall, composed, gray at the temples, the kind of presence that changes the air in a room. Deborah was on her feet immediately. Who is this? I stepped aside and looked at her. Funny, I thought. She brought someone too. Robert walked in without hesitation. No handshake. No greeting. He placed his briefcase directly beside Neil's folder on the table. Robert Webb, estate attorney, he said. I represent Sophie Aubrey in all matters concerning the Ruth Aubrey estate. Neil's face drained of color. I am retained by the beneficiary, Robert added. Yes, I said. Neil began gathering his papers slowly. The sound of pages was loud in the silence. Deborah snapped. This is ridiculous. We're trying to handle this as a family. Robert didn't respond to her. He picked up the document from the coffee table and read it in silence. 30 seconds. Then he set it down. This document attempts to transfer the entire estate to Deborah Kessler without compensation and includes a waiver of contest rights. It was prepared without independent counsel for the signatory. He looked at Neil. Who drafted this? I did, Neil said. Are you certified in estate or probate law? Silence. Robert continued. This document has no legal standing. I advise my client not to review, sign, or acknowledge it in any form. Neil closed his folder. Ray looked away. Robert stayed standing, both hands flat on the table. Let me be clear, he said. The will of Ruth Aubrey was executed on March 14, 2024, with 2 witnesses and a notary present. It was supported by a physician's capacity evaluation. It has been filed and certified by the probate court. He turned slightly toward Deborah. No agreement in this room, no verbal arrangement, and no pressure applied anywhere changes that legal reality. Sophie Aubrey is the sole beneficiary. That is not negotiable. That is court-certified fact. Deborah opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Brenda stood. This is a family matter. You have no business here. Robert didn't even look at her. The moment a lawyer was introduced and legal documents were placed in front of a beneficiary without independent counsel, he said, this stopped being a family matter. Ellen hadn't moved. She was watching Deborah differently now, like someone seeing a mask slip. Ray grabbed his jacket slowly. Neil stood. We're done here, he said. He looked at Ray. I told you this wasn't the way. Ray said nothing. Neil left. His car started outside within half a minute. 4 people remained, and the room no longer belonged to Deborah. She sat down slowly on the couch, pressing her fingers to her temples. This isn't about money, she said quietly now. This is about what's right. Mom would never leave me with nothing. She loved me. She did love you, I said. That was never the question. Then why? Deborah whispered. Her mascara had started to run at the edges. Why would she do this to me? I didn't answer right away. I let the question hang in the room. Let it settle into everyone there. Because desperation and entitlement are not the same thing. Desperation can be reasoned with. Entitlement cannot. Brenda leaned forward. Deborah did everything for that family. She planned every holiday, every reunion. She kept everyone connected. She held all the phone numbers. She kept this family together. I said quietly, that's not the same thing. Brenda's mouth tightened. Deborah stood again. She walked toward the window where Ray had been earlier and looked out at the empty driveway. He was gone. His truck was gone. Neil was gone. You've all decided I'm the villain, she said. Fine. But I was her daughter too. I deserved something. Ellen shifted uncomfortably. Sophie stared at her hands. I looked at my sister. The woman who called my daughter a thief. Who showed up at her campus and humiliated her in front of classmates, who forged our mother's signature while she was too weak to hold a pen. And I thought, you are about to learn exactly what you deserve. I reached down and opened my briefcase. I had been waiting 4 months for this moment. The click of it opening sounded too loud in the silence. Or maybe the room had just gone that still. I pulled out a manila envelope. The third one. Same size as Neil's. Same color, but this one had yellow tabs and a certified stamp in the corner. I placed it on the coffee table beside the voluntary relinquishment document. 6 withdrawals, I said. I laid out the first page. Bank statements. Highlighted lines. My mother's savings account over 8 months. I placed it flat. Ellen leaned forward immediately. $3,000 in April, $2,000 in June, $5,000 in August, $2,000 in September, $1,500 in October, $1,500 in November. I placed each statement down one by one. Total, $15,000. All withdrawn while Mom was in hospice care, or too weak to leave the house. Next page. 3 of these withdrawal slips include a signature. Supposedly my mother's. Deborah still didn't move. I sent them for forensic handwriting analysis, I continued. My voice stayed steady. I already knew the answer. The examiner confirmed the signatures are inconsistent with Ruth Aubrey's known handwriting. The strokes are too heavy, too controlled. My mother's hand was weak. These were not written by her. I looked at Deborah. Her fingers were now digging into the couch cushion. Ellen picked up one statement. She read it closely, line by line. When she set it down, her expression had changed completely. Deborah's hands began to shake. I reached into the briefcase again. This was the part one had never wanted to read aloud. Not because I lacked proof. Because it was my mother's voice. And once spoken, it could never be returned to paper. I lifted the letter. 2 pages. Yellow legal paper. Blue ink. My mother wrote this and hid it in her cedar box, I said. Sophie found it 2 days ago. I looked at Sophie. She nodded once. I didn't read everything. Only what mattered. Deborah borrowed $80,000 from me over 15 years. Not a single dollar was repaid. Pause. Let it land. When I was hospitalized last March, someone withdrew money from my account. I know who. The room felt sealed shut. Ellen covered her mouth. Brenda stared at the floor. Sophie didn't look away from Deborah. I continued. I did not confront her because I didn't have the strength for that fight. But I changed my will because love should not become a debt someone collects on. I folded the letter and placed it on the table, between the bank records and the unsigned document. 3 pieces. 3 truths. 1 table. Deborah's voice cracked. She was confused. She was sick. She didn't know what she was writing. She knew exactly what she was writing, I said. She listed amounts. She listed dates. She described withdrawals while she was hospitalized. This isn't confusion, Deborah. This is clarity written under exhaustion. Robert stepped forward. He had been silent until now, letting me finish. The will of Ruth Aubrey is valid and certified, he said. No family agreement, no document, and no pressure in this room changes that. He looked at Deborah. Regarding the withdrawals, $15,000 was taken during a period of medical incapacity. 3 signatures have been flagged by forensic analysis as inconsistent with the known handwriting of the account holder. He paused. Forgery of a financial signature is a felony in Ohio. No referral has been filed yet. That depends on what happens next. Brenda stood sharply. You can't threaten her. She's grieving. Robert didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on Deborah. You were never entitled to what you didn't earn. The words dropped like weight into water. Stillness followed. Then Deborah slammed her hand on the table. The papers shifted. You have no right. She was my mother. She was mine too, I said. And she made her decision. Deborah turned on me. Her face flushed. Her hands clenched. You planned this. You let Sophie walk in here alone so you could destroy me. I let Sophie walk in here alone, I said, because you invited her alone. I balanced the room. Deborah opened her mouth. Closed it. Then something in her broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. She sat down, but not on the couch. On the floor. Right beside the coffee table. Like her legs simply stopped working. Ray left me, she said. The voice wasn't sharp anymore. It was empty. He moved out in February. Took his name off the mortgage. I've been covering it alone on one income. I'm 3 months behind. The bank sent a notice last week. She pressed her hands against her face. I needed that money, Gina. I needed it because I have nothing. I'm 45 years old and I have nothing. The room stayed silent. Sophie sat watching, hands clasped tightly. Ellen had uncrossed her arms. Even Brenda, who had been tense since Robert arrived, had gone still. For a brief moment, I saw my sister. Not the woman who forged our mother's signature. Not the one who cornered my daughter in a parking lot. Just Deborah. Scared. Broken. Alone. Then the rest returned to me. The signatures. The $80,000 never repaid. Sophie on my couch, shaking as she asked, "Should I just give it to her?" "You could have asked," I said quietly. "You could have picked up the phone and said, 'Gina, I'm struggling.' You could have been honest. With me, with Sophie, with anyone." Deborah lifted her head. "Instead, you forged Mom's name while she was dying. You showed up at Sophie's school and called her a thief. You set up this meeting to corner a 21-year-old into signing away her future." I paused. "That was your choice. Not mine." Ellen spoke first. She had been near the hallway for almost 20 minutes, taking everything in like someone who came for dinner and walked into a courtroom instead. She looked at Deborah on the floor, then at me. "I came here because Deborah told me Sophie was being greedy." Her voice was steady now. "She said Sophie manipulated Aunt Ruth. She said you were backing her up to get money through your daughter." Ellen shook her head slowly. I was ready to believe her. She picked up a bank statement, glanced at it, then set it down. "I see now who is greedy." Deborah flinched. Ellen turned to me. "Gina, I owe you an apology. I should have asked you. I shouldn't have taken her word." "You didn't know," I said. "Now you do." Brenda stood. She picked up her purse, buttoned her cardigan, and walked out without a word. The screen door shut hard behind her. Ray was already gone. Neil was already gone. Now Brenda. Deborah sat alone on the floor of our mother's living room. The house that belonged to Sophie. The house where Mom wound the clock every Sunday and baked lemon bars for neighbors. The house Deborah tried to take. She didn't look up when I stood. I placed my hand on Sophie's shoulder. She rose with me. "Let's go home," I said. At the door, Sophie paused. She looked back at Deborah. For a second, I thought she might speak. She didn't. She simply touched the pearl brooch at her collar and stepped outside. Some things don't need words. 3 weeks later, Sophie finalized the estate transfer. The house on Maple Drive became legally hers. The savings account was transferred into her name. Harold Kimball completed the final filings, and Robert sent Deborah a formal notice. It was simple. It stated we were aware of the $15,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. It stated the forensic handwriting analysis flagged the signatures. And it stated that if the funds were not returned within 30 days, the matter would be referred to the county prosecutor. Deborah returned the money in 10 days. No call. No message. Just a bank transfer. $15,000 appeared in Sophie's account on a Tuesday afternoon. Sophie didn't celebrate. She set it aside for renovations. She moved into the house in the first week of April. She kept most of Mom's furniture. She painted the guest room soft blue and turned Mom's bedroom into a reading room, shelves, a warm lamp, a chair by the window. The cedar jewelry box went on the top shelf. Beside it, a framed photo of Mom mid-laugh, flower on her apron. The box that once held jewelry now held something heavier. A letter. A memory. A voice that still carried weight. Every Sunday, Sophie and I had dinner at Maple Drive. Ellen came twice, first with a pie, then with her daughter. Nobody mentioned Deborah. I told Deborah through Robert that she was still welcome to build a relationship with Sophie, but only through honesty. No lawyers. No pressure. No documents on tables. Just conversation and effort. She never called. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. I can't control that. But I can control who I let near my daughter. And from here on, the door stays open, but the terms are mine. One Sunday in late April, Ellen was at dinner. Sophie was talking about the reading room, how she organized the shelves by genre, just like Grandma used to. Ellen smiled. "And the meeting?" she asked. Sophie laughed softly. The look on Aunt Deborah's face when Mom walked in. She was so calm. She just set her briefcase down like she owned the room and said, "Funny, she brought someone too." Ellen laughed. "Your mom is something else." "She is," Sophie said. "Always has been." I stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes, listening through the doorway. I didn't turn around. Just let her voice fill the house. The cedar box sat on the shelf in the next room. The pearl brooch rested in Sophie's drawer. The lemon tree in the backyard was beginning to bloom again. Some things you protect because they're valuable. Some things because they can't be replaced. My daughter is both. And I learned this. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. Sometimes it only takes preparation, timing, and standing between your child and the people who forget what love is supposed to mean. Nobody is entitled to what they didn't earn. Not by birth. Not by age. Not by volume. Patience is not weakness. Preparation is not revenge. And protecting your family is never something you apologize for. That is my story. One family meeting. One briefcase. And one truth that changed everything. If you've ever had to protect someone you love from the people who should have protected them, share it, subscribe, leave a comment. And I'll see you next time.